So today we're very excited to kick off the Bare Necessities Hackathon. This is the largest and the most ambitious hackathon that Moonbeam has done to date. We're no stranger to running big exclusive hackathons. We did 3 last year in 2022, and this is our first major one of 2023. Today, I'm very excited to be joined by Derek Yu, founder of Moonbeam and CEO of PureStake, as well as we're very thrilled to be joined by AWS. We have Stacey Ann from AWS Asia, head of Web3 for Amazon Web Services Asia. And so I just wanted to first kick things off with just a very brief introduction, and then we'll hand things over to Stacey. So this hackathon is a month long, and so we're just kicking off this week. We have plenty of time, so that's very important. We also have tons of opportunities for builders here. So in addition to monetary prizes, we have the opportunity for every participant to apply for AWS credits. And we'll discuss more about that later. We have workshops starting off tomorrow with Chainlink, and I'll dive more into these exact workshops and what the structure of the hackathon looks like. There also will be a chance for lots of feedback and questions and everything like that. We have office hours that will be starting up not next week, but the week after. And so there'll be plenty of chances for you to interact with engineers from each of these teams to get help and get feedback on your projects. So with that, I'd love to hand it over to Stacey to introduce AWS Web3 and to discuss a little bit more about Amazon Web Services participation in the Bare Necessities Hackathon.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Kevin. Hopefully everyone can hear me perfectly.
Got you.
Awesome. So it's great to be here with the Moonbeam team. And, for us at AWS, we're always very excited to support the Web3 developers and Web3 broader community. So for us, as many of you may already know, AWS has been supporting the space behind the scenes for many, many years, providing the underlying infrastructure that supports a lot of the different layers within the Web3 space, all the way from layer 1 up to the dApps and the exchanges, which are the on-off ramps for Web3. So for us, maybe 2 years ago, we received the highest senior leadership buy-in to be more upfront and more open about the support that we are giving to the community. And so this year, we have taken a more active role in partnering with amazing Web3 native projects, founders, community builders, etc., and doing joint partnerships with them and events such as this, as well as hackathons, speaking engagements, and we did something similar with a few other projects. So for us, we're very excited to focus on helping the startup community within Web3 to scale and grow, as well as supporting enterprises and brands who are looking to invest and explore the space. And for us, we are very much focused on being the facilitator. So we don't want to build everything. We want to provide the tools that our customers ask us for, and then empower Web3 founders, Web3 builders to be the ones who are redefining the internet. So that's how we are approaching Web3, and that's how that's why we're excited to support Web3 builders, Web3 developers, and Web3 projects to redefine the next phase of the internet. So that's a little bit about our approach to Web3. For us, we are focused on supporting projects in primarily 4 ways. We are looking to support on go-to-market. So, if your project is looking to expand, if it's looking to develop a business case, revenue, that's something that we have a lot of programs that we can help founders and developers with. AWS is global, and so we also help different projects who are looking to move into new locations. We also have programs to do that. The second piece is around visibility, right? We do, work obviously with the likes of Moonbeam as well as other players within the space to give them an opportunity to utilize the AWS platform to share the amazing work that they're doing, the really cool projects that they're building with Web 2.5 as well as Web 2, which, we know that we have to engage in order for mass adoption. The third piece is around investment facilitation. We do have funds that we are looking to invest in future tech, and we also help to facilitate investments introduction with Web3 native VCs who are excited to still invest in the space and not, have inhibitions around, the current bear market or where you'd have to explain in detail what even is a token. So that's who my team is primarily interacting with, the Web3 native VCs, who will immediately get it and be able to provide guidance for the developers as well as projects. And then the last piece is around product. So we do try to build what our customers are asking us for. And so we receive feedback from the community, what's the next phase of products that are coming through, right? Is it on-chain analytics? Is it, decentralized ID? Is it multi-chain infrastructure? That's a lot of the work that we do to help the community synthesize the feedback and empower our builders to build the right tools for Web3. So for us, we're very excited to support Moonbeam as well as the developers and builders that are in the ecosystem. We will have technical mentors, business mentors that are able to support this initiative, and always happy to answer questions about what we're doing in the space and what we're observing in the space as well. So thanks so much, Kevin.
Thank you so much, Stacey. We're thrilled to have you on board. And you made it very clear that AWS is a long-term builder in this space, that you've been here for a while, and that you're going to be here for a while, that you take a long-term view as we do as well. So now I'm very excited to introduce Derek Yu, founder of Moonbeam and CEO of PureStake, and he'll give a state of the ecosystem update, as well as some updates on what he'd love to see, perhaps some ideas being built for the hackathon.
Yeah, thanks, Kevin. So just way of introduction, founder of Moonbeam, and been working obviously on this project for quite some time now. And I wanted to maybe give just a little bit of insight into like why the project was started. And actually, I think those reasons that motivated us to start the project in the first place, are kind of ring as true now, even some years later, as they did when we first started. So I wanted to touch on that and kind of weave that into what some of the core underlying ideas and goals are for Moonbeam, and why there's really some great opportunities right now engaging in things like this hackathon to be kind of at the front row of what I think are some of the most interesting and exciting like areas, not only Web3 but in all of tech, honestly. So just to give you a little bit of insight into what the original motivation for Moonbeam was, is the vision really was that there's going to be a lot of blockchains, right? And I am a big believer in this, that while even when we started, like back in 2019, there was some number. Now there's some like larger number. That number is going to continue to expand. And I use this historical analogy a lot, right? Where with when you think about like the history of compute, there was a time when there was very few computers, and they've become increasingly specialized and numerous like over time, right? Whereas when you first started, there was just some very small number. They were very expensive. They required very specialized expertise to like make them run. Now you go to a platform like AWS, and it takes about like 2 clicks, right, to create as many computers as you want. And so I see that kind of direction, a similar direction for Web3 and blockchain infrastructure, where we're moving from this kind of environment where there's very few chains and people think of things in single chain like mindsets, to it being a much more diverse and proliferated blockchain environment where there's many different kinds of chains, many different kinds of specialized chains. And so that's kind of the context or the idea within which Moonbeam was started. And so I think the first idea was to create like a smart contract platform and do this EVM implementation, right? Because there's different tech stacks out there for building for building smart contract platforms, and just like kind of operating systems, is kind of consolidation that's going to happen around some set of technology stacks, and our bet was on the EVM as one of those. I think that's borne out. It's hard to imagine a world in which the EVM is not at least one of the kind of operating systems or tech stacks out there for builders to build upon. But just as important as EVM is this kind of multi-chain vision, let's call it, right? So specifically for Moonbeam, that means that we have this EVM environment that is compatible with a lot of the tools and technologies out there that Web3 builders need. But we specifically, Moonbeam has been specifically designed to be a great place to support cross-chain and multi-chain use cases. And so, want to spend kind of a moment, talking about those, because I do think those represent, again, like a really big opportunity, right now in particular in Web3, as I think there's a big shift underway from this kind of single chain mindset to this, let's call it like natively multi-chain or like cross-chain mindset. And so what do I kind of mean by that? So, if historically like developers chose like one chain to deploy to, what we see almost as the default now is developers need a strategy that allows them to get to multiple chains. And why? It's pretty simple. It's that, if you think about the addressable market for your application, does it make sense to be limited to the users and assets on one chain, or to, be on many chains? And the answer, of course, is that the latter is much more favorable, right? So just as when you have a regular business, you may start in one city, but you'll want to expand, to multiple cities ultimately with your product or your offering. And so I think this kind of, when you actually talk to developers, having a multi-chain approach or strategy makes a lot of sense. The other thing that is happening at the same time is kind of wanting this desire to want to get to as many chains as possible is around the user experience, right? Where I think that right now users are very conscious of the infrastructure that they're interacting with when it comes to Web3 dApps. But you can see that that's improving like over time, right? Where the user experiences, my belief is that they're going to move to be like much less kind of like chain agnostic, let's call it, right? Where your users are going to be asked to know less and less about the infrastructure they're interacting with. And again, back to that historical analogy, I think that the dApps of the future, like you're probably going to be interacting with many different kinds of specialized blockchains. You won't even realize it. And that's similar to how it's gone with compute, right? When you're using a mobile app, when you're using Twitter right now, we're interacting with many different servers if we don't really know it, right? Many different kinds of computers. So I see like a similar direction, happening. And so, yeah, I think this is really the idea for Moonbeam, is to be this place that has, support for, all of the great tools that exist for development around, particularly around the EVM tech stack, but also has a lot of the integrations and frankly, even like the, folks from the DevRel team like Kevin that have knowledge of, how to use some of the cross-chain technologies that are actually quite new. Many of them launched just like last year. And I'll give an example of one just to kind of set the stage and kind of make it a little bit more tangible. There is a protocol that recently launched on Moonbeam called Prime protocol. So that's up and running now. You can go visit it. And the idea of it is that it's a hub and spoke architecture, kind of natively multi-chain DApp. So what does that mean? What do I mean when I say, hub and spoke architecture? So the idea is that you have a kind of hub set of contracts on Moonbeam, but then you have remote satellite contracts that are part of the protocol on a bunch of other chains. So for example, on Ethereum mainnet, on Avalanche, on Polygon, and so on. And the idea is that this is a DeFi protocol, so it is kind of in the DeFi space. Users can deposit, kind of lend and borrow crypto assets. So the idea is, as a user on Avalanche, you can deposit like AVAX there, say, that then triggers messages to be sent back to the hub, which store kind of the state across all chains in this in the protocol. And so that's kind of recorded then that you've made that deposit. Then you can go to another chain, like let's say Ethereum mainnet, and you can borrow against what you've deposited on Avalanche. And again, there's messages that get sent back to the hub on Moonbeam to say, hey, like does this user have any credit? Yes, they do. So let them borrow up to some amount based on the collateral that they had on Avalanche. And so this is like a pretty different idea than having a single chain deployment. You have this deployment that spans multiple chains, but acts as one system. And so I think this is a great example because it has this improved UX where you're kind of spanning multiple chains at once. The users are less, need to be less conscious of which chain they're on. They can use any assets they have on one chain on any other chain. There's a lot to like here, right? And then the cool part is that Moonbeam in this equation is acting as this kind of, let's call it almost like a backend database or hub of all of this activity that's happening across chains. And so I was looking the other day at Axelar core. So Axelar is one of the messaging technologies that's used, by the developers of Prime for sending messages between chains. And Moonbeam is now one of the top routes, I think, from both Polygon and from Avalanche for general messages being passed on Axelar. Users on Polygon and Avalanche are using Prime, and then they don't even realize it, but they're also using Moonbeam, right? So like as they're interacting with the contracts on Polygon and Avalanche, that's generating messaging traffic. Those messages are being sent back to Moonbeam. State is being persisted, and other logic is happening like on Moonbeam as kind of a backend, almost like a backend cloud in a way, right? Like kind of this backend service that's powering the application. And so this is just, this is an example of the kinds of things that are possible these days. And I think that we're at the very, very beginning of people understanding these technologies, figuring out how to use them, to create, better user experiences, more efficient protocols. I'm quite convinced that the approaches and protocols that take this approach will become the dominant ones moving forward, since they have so many advantages over these like single chain deployments that are out there. And so I think that's just a theme I think that I'm a big believer in, that Moonbeam is a great place. We're kind of quite focused on making Moonbeam a great place for this kind of use case. And by the way, that includes a bunch of messaging protocols that are supported on Moonbeam, including things like XCM, which is the Polkadot native one, a number of other messaging protocols such as Axelar, Layer 0, Wormhole, and others. But also included are a lot of the tools that you need to then also create like great user experiences. And I'd be remiss if I didn't mention obviously some of the other great sponsors here at the protocol. So folks like Chainlink, Biconomy, SubQuery, Indexer. Biconomy has like a among other things, a system for creating like gasless transactions if you want to onboard a lot of users, without having to force them to go into creating wallets and funding wallets. That's an important thing when it comes to the UX on initial user acquisition. And Chainlink, doesn't need an introduction as being this kind of core pillar of particularly like a lot of DeFi use cases. So we have all of these tools. We have this all of these cross-chain messaging systems hooked into Moonbeam. So I would say that if there's anything I would encourage people to do is to explore some of these, not just tools and infrastructure that exist on Moonbeam, but also these cross-chain messaging systems, which enable all of these interesting like new architectures and different possibilities. I think this is a really big opportunity, having not only access to the tools, but also mentors, workshops that are knowledgeable about like these areas to help you kind of get up to speed on how to use these things and build kind of the next big protocols out there. So Kevin, I think those are maybe just some of the initial thoughts I have.
Thank you so much, Derek. So you mentioned that for Axelar's top routes, I think Moonbeam and Avalanche one-way paths were both first and second in terms of top routes, and that's like a huge achievement, and something that we should celebrate and share. In terms of the rest of the structure of the Twitter space, I just wanted to talk a little bit about the prizes, so you can know what to keep your eye on, what to look in. what to look into, and we'll also, of course, take a look at the workshops, and we'll go over the schedule just a little bit. Feel free to drop a tweet in the comments here. We'll be taking a look at those to address any questions. And yeah, let's get right to it. So the Moonbeam Foundation, as you may know, is sponsoring a couple different prizes. The first two ones are grand prizes, and in terms of judging evaluations of each prize, each sponsor may have its own particular requirements for what you'll need to include in your submission and what things will be looked at. But in general, each prize that's evaluated by the judges will be looked at for about 4 things. And that is, first one is technical excellence. So this will be things like code quality. This will be things like architecture and design. And this will also emphasize building something that's perhaps a bit more complex, taking a bit more technical risk. That will be rewarded. So if you are building something that's more difficult, that maybe isn't quite fully done and fully fleshed out, that is quite fine. That will be ranked higher than something that's maybe like a simple copy paste deployment where there's no real risk taken there, even if that's kind of flawlessly deployed. So the second thing is user experience. Moonbeam is focused on providing the best possible user experience and giving you the tools to build that as a developer. That's where all of our integrations with various GMP providers fit in. That's where our efforts on building out XCM compatibility and all of our pre-compiles as well. We'll get into that in just a second. So are you building an experience that's more enjoyable, that's easier to use, and that's creating really a wonderful experience for your users? So that's the second judging category. The third judging category is value proposition. So if you're going to be a long-term sustainable project, you have to really be providing some value for your users where they're coming back to you because you're solving a problem for them, right? And that's a valuable solution that you're providing. And so something that has long-term value potential there. And lastly, the last one is creativity. So that's technical excellence, user experience, value proposition, and creativity. So the grand prizes are going to be evaluated across these 4 categories. And the Moonbeam Foundation is presenting 2 equal prizes of $7,500 each. Moonbeam Foundation is also sponsoring one more bounty, which is best use of any Moonbeam precompile. We have a huge list that you can find at our docs site. You can also just search for Moonbeam precompiles on Google, and that'll be the first one that comes up. The number is growing all the time, and so there's no particular exact one that you need to use, but a couple you might consider would be the batch precompile, which allows you to combine transactions in particular ways. So you can have 2 transactions that must succeed in order for the batch transaction to succeed. You could have transactions continue until one fails and then stop, or you could have just try to do as many as you can. And so that's the batch precompile. There's also the call permit precompile, and with the call permit precompile, you can dispatch not just a signed approval. That's kind of the common use case for approving a swap to be made on a DEX without a transaction. But you can actually, with a signature, you can authorize any arbitrary EVM transaction, which is very, very cool. I'll speed things up a little bit. There's also the staking precompile, the democracy precompile. So there are lots of opportunities. And keep in mind that for many of these precompiles, we have very detailed tutorials walking you step by step how to interact with each of the methods, how to test them in a UI, so you can explore them in Remix before you integrate them into your project. So let's move on to Chainlink's bounties here. So Chainlink is the Hackathon Oracle provider. You've probably heard of them before. And they'll have a workshop tomorrow. Richard Gottelber from Chainlink, he did a workshop for us, I think back in December or so. He did the Moon Builders workshop. And so we're thrilled to have him back. That'll be tomorrow, same time as this Twitter Spaces. And so let me just quickly introduce Chainlink's bounties. So this is open-ended, similar to the Moonbeam Foundation grand prizes. And so you just need to build something that's awesome using Chainlink. And anything that's specified on Chainlink's documentation counts and is eligible, such as Chainlink automation, VRF, proof of reserve feeds, NFT floor pricing feeds, and of course, Chainlink data and price feeds. Now, if any of those sound unfamiliar, like if you haven't heard of proof of reserve or you haven't heard of NFT floor pricing, not to worry, Richard will go over all of those tomorrow, speaking exactly about what those are. And there'll be a chance, of course, to ask questions. So in general, the project should make use of Chainlink to make a state change on the blockchain. And it can be any Chainlink service. So next up, we have StelSwap's bounties. And StelSwap is sponsoring 10 different prizes. So a huge number here of $1,000 each. And this is for each project that lists itself on StelSwap's new IDO platform. If StelSwap has more than 10 qualifying projects that go through, then the top 10 highest scoring projects, as determined by the judges, will be the recipients of these prizes. And we have a StelSwap workshop 2 hours later than this Twitter Spaces on Friday. So that'll be at 9 a.m. Pacific, 12 noon Eastern, and then I believe that would be 4 p.m. UTC. Next up, we have I also want to mention that StelSwap is a major sponsor here and also the official hackathon DEX, of course. DEX standing for Decentralized Exchange. StelSwap is the largest DEX on Moonbeam, and I also believe the largest DEX on Polkadot. So next up is SubQuery. And SubQuery is a blockchain indexer. And what's unique about them is that they provide access to both the EVM and the substrate side of things. So this is very critical. So you have you may have other indexing protocols that do a very good job at looking at the EVM, but you're kind of missing out on indexing the substrate side of things. And so you could work with two different solutions, but you'd probably prefer as a developer to work with just one, which unifies it together in a wonderful way. So SubQuery's prize here is for you to build a SubQuery project that indexes ERC 721 NFTs from Moonbeam. You can also look at Moonriver, A-Star, and Shiden. And in terms of the qualifications here, this should use SubQuery's multi-chain indexing solution. And SubQuery also has a sample schema. You don't have to copy and use the exact one. You can design it exactly as you'd like. But any of those requirements will be specified on their bounty page. So next up, we have Biconomy. And Biconomy, as Derek mentioned, allows you to do gasless transactions and more. They also have the ability to do one-click batch transactions. They also have social login. And Biconomy is always building additional tools and things to make your life easier as a developer. They also have a multi-chain relayer infrastructure and a couple other cool things. So I think that I didn't mention the prize amount for SubQuery. So I'll just say that SubQuery has up to $5,000 in prizes. And then for Biconomy, Biconomy is also sponsoring $5,000 worth of prizes. And the split here is $3,000 for first place. And then there'll be two second place winners of $1,000 each for Biconomy. And let me just take a quick look at the comments section. Feel free to tweet any questions that you have. And I also want to mention the schedule for the following week. So I mentioned a couple of the workshops. We have the SubQuery workshop. That will be at 7 p.m. Eastern time on Monday, June 5th. And then we'll have the Moonbeam workshop. That will be Tuesday, June 6th at 7 a.m. So same time as this Twitter space right now, 7 a.m. Pacific, 10 a.m. Eastern, and then 2 p.m. UTC. And then Wednesday, June 7th, we'll have the Biconomy workshop. That will be at 2 p.m. EST or 6 p.m. UTC. And then we'll have office hours the following week. So I just wanted to very briefly, before we wrap up, I wanted to talk about where the name came from. Bare Necessities. What is the theme? Where did this come from? Etc. So the Bare Necessities focuses on teams that provide developers with the critical Web3 building blocks in order to build an application. In other words, if you want to build the best Web3 DApp, you're probably going to have to use multiple different providers here that are sponsoring this hackathon. So if you're building a DeFi app, you're probably going to want to integrate with StelSwap, and you're probably going to need oracles from Chainlink. You may even use gasless transactions, and you'll also be using Moonbeam. So there are many different ways that you can make your life easier as a developer, and a way that you can build a multi-chain DApp, which is an architecture that will be a wonderful experience for your end users. And as I mentioned, we have ways to simplify and make these experiences easier for you as a developer for building. So XCM doesn't have to be intimidating. We have precompiles that simplify it and make it easier. And the same thing with our integrations with our GMP providers. And this goes, of course, for the end users as well. As Derek mentioned, users may be using Prime and they may not even know that their transactions are being routed through Axelar. They can see the transaction status and they can see that it's confirmed, and they can check their margin and they can do all of that. But the complexities are abstracted away. And so getting back to the Bare Necessities name, and it's a little bit of a play on the bear market, of course, but it's meant to emphasize building, because that's what we're here to do, and that's what we're most excited about. Some of the best projects come out, of markets that are, maybe a little bit, a little bit more difficult, to build in. But this allows folks to focus on the fun part, which is building. And so that's what we're very excited to do here. And we're very grateful to the Moonbeam Foundation, to AWS, Chainlink, StellaSwap, Biconomy, and SubQuery. We're thrilled to have all of these sponsors. They've all signed on board because they want access to you. They want access to you, developers. So we're thrilled to have everybody on board. Be sure to join us tomorrow, same time as this Twitter Spaces, for the Chainlink workshop. If you haven't registered yet, you can go ahead and register at moonbeam.hackerearth.com, and you'll be encouraged to join with a team. It's perfectly fine if you want to be a solo hacker. That's no problem at all. And if you want to meet other hackers, we have in our Moonbeam Discord at discord.gg/moonbeam. We have a hackathons channel. That is going to be the primary channel that's going to be monitored for Q&A. You can ask a question in any channel, of course, but we're kind of going to be prioritizing looking at this one. And that's a great place to meet other hackers as well, and to perhaps get faster answers to your questions. Another thing which I should point out is that we actually have an AI bot in our Discord. It's called Kappa AI. And so if you're asking a question at like 3 a.m, there will be a Kappa bot that can answer potentially answer your questions within 30 seconds or so. Of course, we are here to clarify and provide more guidance as well. So I think that brings us close to the end of the Bare Necessities hackathon kickoff. Did anybody want to any closing thoughts from any of our speakers?
I could just chime in that I gave a little bit of a shout out to some of the sponsors earlier, but just wanted to, thank them again. Chainlink, Economy, SubQuery, Stellasop, but also, thank Stacey and AWS for participating in the hackathon. Web3 projects all need core infrastructure to get off the ground, so cool to see organizations like AWS supporting Web3 builders and Moonbeam and with credits even. So that's I didn't realize that was the case. So that's really cool. So thanks for that.
My first interaction with running a node was running on AWS, and it was a phenomenal experience. And it definitely exposed me into, some of the most like fun parts of being in crypto. So I'm very grateful for that.
We're glad to hear it. Thanks for having us.
Thank you so much, Stacey. Thanks everybody for joining. And we're thrilled to have the Bare Necessities Hackathon presented by Moonbeam and AWS. See you soon, everyone.
Thanks.